Everything your parents told you about getting rich is statistically wrong. They studied 10,000 actual millionaires, the biggest study of its kind ever done, and the number one thing that built their wealth was not a high salary, not a fancy degree, not being born into money. And when you hear what it actually was, you're going to be angry that nobody told you this sooner. If you clicked on this video, you're about to find out exactly what separates ordinary people from millionaires, and it is not what the internet has been selling you. We are going through every single finding from this study, breaking down the 5 principles that showed up in virtually every case, and by the end of this video, you will know precisely what you need to start doing right now. Let's get into it. In 2017, Ramsey Solutions sat down and did something nobody had ever done at this scale before. They surveyed 10,000 millionaires across the United States, regular people who had quietly crossed the $1 million net worth threshold. And they asked them one question in every possible way. How did you actually do it? This wasn't a Forbes list. This wasn't a bunch of tech founders and hedge fund managers. These were teachers, accountants, nurses, small business owners, people who drove used cars and packed their lunch and never once went viral on the internet. And what they found completely destroyed the most popular financial myth in America, the idea that you need to earn a lot of money to build a lot of wealth. Here is the stat that should stop you cold. 79% of the millionaires in this study did not receive any inheritance, not a dollar. They built it from scratch on normal incomes, in normal jobs, over normal lifetimes. And here's the one that really gets me. Only 31% of them averaged $100,000 a year in household income over the course of their careers. That means the majority of these millionaires never even broke 6 figures. Not once. So if income isn't the driver, what is? That is exactly what this video is about. Because buried inside this study are 5 principles that showed up so consistently across so many different cases that calling them coincidences would be intellectually dishonest. These are not theories. These are not motivational talking points. These are the documented behaviors of 10,000 people who actually did it. Before we get to the principles, I want to tell you about 2 people, not because they were in the Ramsey study, but because they are the human face of everything the study proved. The first is Ronald Reed. Ronald worked as a gas station attendant and a janitor his entire working life in Brattleboro, Vermont. He drove a used car. He wore the same coat for years, held together with a safety pin. When he died in 2014, the people who knew him assumed he had very little. His will told a different story. Ronald Reed left behind an $8 million estate, almost entirely built from stocks he had quietly bought and held for decades. The second is Ann Shaber. Ann worked as an IRS auditor in New York City and retired in 1944 with $5,000 in savings. She was famously frugal. She walked instead of taking the bus to save the fare. She bought stocks, reinvested every dividend, and never sold. When she died in 1995 at 101 years old, she had turned that $5,000 into $22 million. 2 different people, 2 different eras, 2 completely different lives, but the same playbook. And that playbook is exactly what the Ramsey study found, at scale, across 10,000 people. The 5 non-negotiable principles. All right? Here are the 5 things, not 5 suggestions, not 5 ideas to consider, 5 principles that the data says you cannot skip if building wealth is actually the goal. Principle 1. Spend far less than you earn. This one sounds so obvious that most people hear it, nod their head, and immediately go back to doing the opposite. The Ramsey study found that 94% of millionaires consistently spent less than they made. Not occasionally, not when times were tough. Consistently, as a lifestyle, as a non-negotiable rule. And they did it Not because they were earning massive salaries that made it easy. Remember, the majority never broke $100,000 a year. They did it because they made a decision about what their money was actually for. I want to talk about lifestyle inflation for a second because I think this is the real wealth killer in America, and almost nobody is being honest about it. Lifestyle inflation is what happens when your income goes up and your spending goes up at exactly the same rate. You get a raise, you get a nicer apartment. You get a bonus, you buy a better car. You land a promotion, you start eating out 4 times a week instead of 2. The income number goes up, the bank account stays flat, and 10 years later you're making twice what you used to make and still living paycheck to paycheck. Ronald Reed, the janitor with $8 million, held his jacket together with a safety pin. That is not a metaphor. That is the actual behavior of someone who understood that every dollar that leaves your account is a dollar that is no longer compounding for you. Now, I am not saying you need to live like a monk. I am saying there is a version of your life that costs $2,000 less per month than the one you are currently living, and that $2,000 invested every month for 30 years at a 7% average annual return is $2.4 million. That is not a rounding error. That is a retirement. The gap between what you earn and what you spend is not just a budgeting metric. It is the engine of everything else on this list. Without that gap, none of the other principles can do their job. Principle 2. Invest early and keep investing. Of all the variables in wealth building, time is the one that nobody can manufacture. You cannot hustle your way to more time. You cannot borrow it. You cannot buy it. And yet most people treat it like it is the one thing they have plenty of. Here is what the math actually looks like. An 18-year-old who invests $250 a month into a broad index fund, earning a 7% average annual return, which is a conservative estimate based on long-term historical stock market performance, will have just over $1 million by the time they are 66. They will have personally contributed roughly $143,000 over those years. The other $857,000 is pure compounding. It is time doing the heavy lifting. Now run the same scenario starting at 30. Same $250 a month, same 7% return, same retirement age of 66. You end up with about $430,000. You personally contributed $108,000, so you contributed less than $40,000, less than the 18-year-old, but you end up with more than $500,000 less at retirement. That is the cost of waiting 12 years. $500,000 gone because of delay. The millionaires in the Ramsey study did not wait until they had everything figured out. They did not wait until the market looked good, or until they paid off every debt, or until they had a big enough lump sum to make it feel worth it. They started. They kept going. They automated their contributions so it happened whether they felt like it or not. The Ramsey study found that 75% of millionaires invested consistently for more than 20 years. That is the pattern. Not one big bet. Not perfect timing. Consistent, boring, relentless investing over a long period of time. If you are watching this and you are in your 20s and you have not started yet, today is the day. Not next month. Not after the next paycheck. Today. Because the second best time to start is right now, and every month you wait is a month you are paying for later. Principle 3. Never sell, hold for decades. This is the one that the financial media industry does not want you to internalize because if you actually believed it, you would stop consuming most of their content. Ronald Reed bought stocks and held them. Ann Scheiber bought stocks and held them for over 50 years, reinvesting every dividend, never selling, never reacting, never trying to time anything. The Ramsey millionaires held their investments for decades, and the research on this is overwhelming and consistent. Long-term buy-and-hold investors outperform active traders the vast majority of the time. Here is why selling is so destructive. When you sell, you do 3 things simultaneously, and all 3 work against you. First, you realize the loss or miss the recovery. Markets crash and recover, but only the people still holding capture the recovery. Second, you pay taxes on any gains. Every time you sell a profitable position, you owe the government a cut, and that cut is money that stops compounding. Third, you have to be right twice. You have to be right about when to sell and right about when to get back in, and the research is clear that almost nobody does this successfully over a long period of time. The 2020 COVID crash is the cleanest example in recent memory. The market dropped roughly 34% in about 5 weeks. It was terrifying. It looked like the world was ending. The people who sold locked in those losses. The people who held, or better yet, the people who kept buying, had fully recovered by August and went on to see the market double from those lows over the next 2 years. Patience is not a passive strategy. Patience is an active, deliberate, disciplined decision to do nothing when every instinct and every news headline is screaming at you to do something. It is genuinely one of the hardest things to do in investing, and it is also one of the highest returning. Principle 4. Avoid debt like a disease. The Ramsey study found that 73% of millionaires had never carried a credit card balance. Not just that they paid it off eventually, they never carried a balance at all. And 94% of them lived below their means their entire adult lives. Debt is the mathematical opposite of compounding. Compounding works by earning returns on your returns, snowballing your money upward over time. Debt works by charging interest on your interest, snowballing your obligations upward over time. You cannot run both processes simultaneously and expect compounding to win. Debt cancels it. Let me give you a specific number so this lands properly. The average credit card interest rate in the United States right now is sitting around 20 to 22%. That means every dollar you carry on a credit card balance is costing you 20 cents a year in interest. If you carry a $5,000 balance for 10 years, you are paying somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $12,000 in interest alone, depending on minimum payments, for the privilege of having spent $5,000 a decade ago. That money, every single dollar of it, could have been compounding in an index fund. I want to be clear about what debt I'm talking about here. The Ramsey study and the financial research behind it is not saying a mortgage is the same as credit card debt. There is reasonable debt, a fixed-rate mortgage on a home you can genuinely afford, a student loan for a degree with a clear income payoff. And there is consumer debt, the kind that funds lifestyle, that funds things that depreciate or disappear, that funds the gap between what you earn and what you want to appear to earn. Consumer debt is wealth destruction in disguise. It lets you look richer in the short term while guaranteeing you stay less wealthy in the long term. The millionaires in this study did not fall for the trade. Principle 5. Use tax-advantaged accounts. This is the most underused legal wealth-building tool available to ordinary Americans, and the Ramsey study made the numbers on this impossible to ignore. 80% of the millionaires surveyed said that consistently investing in their employer's 401k was a major factor in their wealth accumulation. 80%. That is not a minority behavior. That is the dominant behavior of people who actually built wealth. Here is why this matters so much, and why it is genuinely not optional if you are serious. A traditional 401k contribution is pre-tax. That means if you are in the 22% tax bracket and you contribute $500 a month, you are only actually reducing your take-home pay by about $390 because the other $110 would have gone to taxes anyway. You are getting $500 working for you for the cost of $390. That is an immediate, guaranteed 28% return before a single investment is made. Then layer the employer match on top of that. The average employer 401k match in the United States is somewhere around 3 to 4% of salary. If you are making $60,000 a year and your employer matches 3%, that is $1,800 of free money per year that you are leaving on the table if you are not contributing at least enough to get the full match. That is $1,800 that compounds for 30 years at 7% and becomes almost $17,000. And that is just 1 year's worth of the match. Beyond the 401k, there is the Roth IRA, which gives you the opposite tax structure. You contribute after-tax dollars, but the growth and all withdrawals in retirement are completely tax-free. If you are young and expect to be in a higher tax bracket later in life, a Roth IRA is one of the most powerful tools available to you. The 401k and the IRA are not complicated. They are not reserved for wealthy people. They are available to virtually anyone with earned income, and yet millions of people either don't use them at all or don't use them anywhere near their potential. Every dollar that goes into a tax-advantaged account instead of a taxable account is a dollar that compounds without the government taking a cut each year. Over 30 years, that difference is enormous. The millionaires in the Ramsey study understood this. They did not invest in these accounts because they had extra money lying around. They made it non-negotiable. They set the contribution first before the money hit their checking account, and they lived on what was left. That is the order of operations that actually works. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Everything you just heard, spend less than you earn, invest early and consistently, never sell, avoid consumer debt, use tax-advantaged accounts, none of it is new information. Personal finance has had these answers for decades. The math has not changed. The research has not changed. The principles have not changed. So why is only a small percentage of the population actually wealthy? I think the honest answer is that knowing something and doing something are separated by a gap that most people never cross. And that gap is filled with three things: lifestyle inflation, short-term thinking, and social pressure. Lifestyle inflation is what happens when income rises and every incremental dollar gets immediately absorbed by a higher standard of living. It feels natural. It feels earned. You worked hard. You got the raise. Why shouldn't you enjoy it? And the answer is not that you shouldn't enjoy it. The answer is that enjoying all of it right now is a direct trade against enjoying a massively larger amount of it later. Every time your income goes up, the wealth-building move is to let your lifestyle stay flat and redirect the difference into investments. Not permanently, not forever, but long enough to build a base that starts compounding on your behalf at a serious scale. Short-term thinking is why people sell when markets drop. It is why people take on debt for things that depreciate. It is why people wait to start investing, because the timing doesn't feel right. The millionaires in the Ramsey study were not gifted with supernatural patience. They simply made a decision to orient their financial choices around a 10-year or 20-year outcome instead of a 10-day or 20-day outcome. That shift in time horizon changes almost every financial decision you make. Social pressure is the one nobody talks about. The pressure to look wealthy is, in many ways, the primary obstacle to actually becoming wealthy. The car you drive, the neighborhood you live in, the vacations you post, the clothes you wear, these are signals you send to other people about where you stand. And the brutal irony is that the people most aggressively sending those signals are often the ones furthest from actual financial security, while the people who have genuinely built wealth frequently look completely unremarkable. The Ramsey study found that the majority of millionaires drove used cars. They did not live in the most expensive neighborhoods they could afford. They did not wear wealth on the outside because their goal was to build it on the inside. Ronald Read wore a jacket held together with a safety pin. He had $8 million in the bank. The wealth gap in America is not primarily an income gap. It is a behavior gap. The behavior of the 10,000 people in this study is documented, it is consistent, and it is available to anyone who decides to use it. I want to come back to where we started. Everything your parents told you about getting rich is statistically wrong. Not because they were trying to mislead you, but because the story we've all been sold about wealth is built on the wrong variables. High salary, lucky break, right connections, right timing. The data says none of that is the primary driver. 10,000 real millionaires, the largest study of its kind ever done. And the answer that came back was the same 5 behaviors over and over across every income level, every profession, every demographic. Spend less than you earn. Invest early and keep investing. Never sell. Avoid consumer debt. Use tax-advantaged accounts. These are not secrets. They are not hacks. They do not require a finance degree or a 6-figure salary or a lucky IPO. They require a decision made once and then defended every day against the lifestyle inflation and short-term thinking and social pressure that will absolutely try to talk you out of it. The people in this study are not special. Ronald Redd was a janitor. Ann Scheiber was a government auditor. The 10,000 in the Ramsey data are teachers and nurses and accountants and small business owners. What they had was not a better starting line, it was a better set of decisions. And now you have the same information they had. What you do with it is entirely up to you. If this video gave you something real, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this content. Subscribe if you want more videos like this, and if you know someone who's stuck in the high salary myth, send this to them. It might be the most useful thing they see this year. I'll see you in the next one.